Jane Vanderpool. I'm the director for the Pima Community College Library. We serve the college community and beyond with access to books, magazines, movies, with research help and help evaluating information, technology resources, and much more. We have 5 physical locations, one on each of the college's campuses. These locations aren't open to patrons right now, but we look forward to a time when we can reopen. And in the meantime, we are offering online ordering and curbside pickup at 3 of our locations, plus 24/7 live chat help online. We'll share more information on how to access these services at the end of the video. But first, a few of our librarians and staff want to share some of their favorite or recent reads, and I will go first. Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey is one of my all-time favorite reads. Every time I go back to it, I find something else to love about it. The desert is more than just a setting in this collection of essays. It's like a filter or a lens, a way of looking at the world with awe and joy and passion. Desert Solitaire captures Abbey's time spent as a seasonal ranger in the then rarely visited Arches and Canyonlands area of southern Utah. He was this guy from Pennsylvania who came out to a foreign and sometimes harsh landscape and just fell in love with it. I had a pretty similar experience when I moved from Michigan to Las Vegas. I really fell in love with the desert. Abbey begins the very first essay with this quote, "This is the most beautiful place on earth. There are many such places. Every man, every woman carries in heart and mind the image of the ideal place, the right place, the one true home, known or unknown, actual or visionary. A houseboat in Kashmir, a view down Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, a gray Gothic farmhouse 2 stories high at the end of a Red Dog Road in the Allegheny Mountains." And he goes on, and he says, for him, the one true place is Moab, or the country around Moab, Utah, the Red Rock country of southern Utah. For me, it's been the deserts. I'm not from the American Southwest, neither was Abbey, but almost right away it felt like my one true home. And I've spent the last 20 plus years happily exploring and experiencing as much of the area as I can. The sunsets, the night skies, the rocks and plants and animals that Abbey celebrates in his writing, they never get old to me, and neither do Abbey's poetic and impassioned, albeit sometimes cranky essays in Desert Solitaire. If you haven't ever read it, maybe give it a try. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a librarian at PCC, and my favorite book is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. If you want to read one book by Dickens, this is definitely it. Apparently, many aspects of the novel were taken from the author's life, and that might be the reason why it rings so true to me. I first read this book when I was 16, and I read a lot, but this one is one of the few that I reread every couple of years. It's like comfort food to me. You follow David from babyhood through to adulthood. And along the way, you really feel like you're getting to know him as a friend, almost like he's a real person, and you really start rooting for him. It was originally written as a serial, so it's very episodic. One section is really awful, another section will be really lovely. It's a book you really don't need to read in one go. You can put it down, put it aside, and then pick it up every once in a while when you want to escape to a different time and place. The best thing about David Copperfield are the amazing characters. My favorite is the motherly ex-nanny Peggotty. Her family has a beached boat on the Suffolk coast turned into a house, and David goes and visits them as a child. And for any city child who's gone out to the country to visit relatives, it really is reminiscent of that lovely feeling where you become part of a family that's completely different from your own. I also like Peggotty's salt of the earth husband, Barkis. He decides he's going to marry her after tasting her pastry, and he has this catchphrase, Barkis is willing. So he tells David, he's willing to settle down, Barkis is willing. He's also a bit of a miser, so he stashes away bits of money in a box labeled old clothes, and that money kind of comes to light later in the book. I also love the unfortunate Mr. Micawber. He is David's landlord at one point, and unfortunately, he is constantly trying to crawl his way out of debt. He actually goes to debtor's prison at some point in the book. But even still, his wife and he are very generous and very kind despite their troubles. And finally, I should mention another favorite of mine is his eccentric old aunt, Betsy Trotwood. She very kindly takes him in and raises him for a portion of his life, even though she's very disappointed that he wasn't born a girl and named after her. So she renames him Trotwood after herself, and she refers often to his non-existent sister, which is actually him if he had been born a girl, named Betsy, which is kind of funny. As in every Dickens novels, there's a cast of bad guys. There's a wicked stepfather, a cruel schoolmaster, a snobbish, self-centered best friend. And one of the worst characters is the backstabbing Uriah Heep, who will do anything to get what he wants. He has these ingratiating mannerisms. He's very tall, thin, and pale, with red hair, and he rubs his hands together and stoops to sort of signify that he's very humble, but he's actually an awful and very cunning person. So the people in Dickens' novels are sort of caricatures, but the great thing about them is that Dickens could really look at people and find the little wonderful things about them, as well as the really terrible flaws in humanity. The book was finished in 1850, and it gives you an idea of how life in Victorian England was pretty tenuous and quite dark. But despite that fact, and the fact that David really does go through some terrible events in his life, the comforting thing about Dickens, and I don't think I'm going to be spoiling it for any potential reader, but there's always some form of justice and happiness that usually results in the end. And along the way, there's a lot of really funny episodes and a lot of things that make you think. And that's why it's my favorite book.
Hello, my name is Amber and I'm a Library Services Specialist here at Pima Community College. The book I'd like to feature this year for the Festival of Books is Coming to Our Senses, Body and Spirit in the Hidden History of the West. This book by Morris Bergman is sort of a philosophical deep dive into Western civilization. It speaks to our alienation, or at least the misconception that we are alienated, and it sort of tries to unpack the idea that our interiority is somehow separate from the outside world. And it talks about some of the institutions that reinforce this separateness, and it manages us to come back to our senses and reconcile the truth of how connected we all are. So for me, it's really helpful to revisit this from time to time. I've got lots of markings in it. Something that is just a helpful reminder that we're all in this together. It has some psychology notes and a lot of history, so if you're interested in something like this, go ahead and give it a whirl. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Susan. I'm one of the Pima librarians, and I'm here to tell you about my favorite book. Actually, I couldn't decide on one book. I decided on a category, cookbooks. And I think cookbooks are particularly important during the pandemic. We aren't able to go out to restaurants. We need to develop some cooking skills so that we can have some tasty food at home. One of the better, if not the best cookbook that I have is Lydia Cooks from the Heart of Italy. It is by Lydia Maticcio Bastianich. And this book has some really great recipes. I've been using it for a number of years.
Hi, my name is Alexis Kopkowski. I'm a librarian from the East Campus, and I want to talk to you about my favorite book, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. It is my favorite because it's a sci-fi book, but it's sort of accessible sci-fi, so you don't have to learn like a bunch of different planet names or population names or, made-up space names. Well, there are some of that. You don't have to learn a lot in order to follow along with the book. It also isn't very long. It's highly satirical. It's autobiographical. So again, it's not heavy on the sci-fi, but it's just enough, I think, to keep it interesting. It's also written in a non-linear timeline, sort of like a Tarantino movie, which is another reason why I like it. It talks about morality a lot, because it's based on Kurt Vonnegut's experiences as a young prisoner of war. And so it's talking a lot about war and PTSD, which I think are still themes that are obviously relevant today. But one of my favorite themes of it also is talking about the American quote-unquote ideal and whether or not that ideal is or maybe even should be the ideal or standard for everyone, which I think is something really important to explore, especially like if you read this as a coming-of-age novel. So there's two really famous sayings from the book. One of them is "Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt," which is obviously the opposite of this sticker that I have here. But it also was written as a joke. So, right, like life isn't like this. It's more like the sticker representation, which I think is why he wrote it, to be a little too optimistic, and that was kind of funny. Another famous line is "So it goes." It's written quite a few times in the book, over 100 times, but and it might seem sort of like a flippant remark, but it isn't. It's used as a device to not only note when morality is being discussed, but also, in my opinion, as a way to pause. So like you can reflect probably on what happened or what may happen as a result of what was just described. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. There's lots of copies at all of the Pima campus libraries.
So I really like this book. It's called The Chemistry Between Us, and it's about a book just about attraction and love and, you know, sexual relationships or anything to do with regrowth and population. And it's not all related to people, it's also related to animals and other species, which is really interesting, which is something that was really something that drew me to the book. It was really interesting. I only thought it would be a little bit inappropriate, but it ended up being really factual and interesting. And as a student that is studying psychology, it's something that I've always loved. And hearing all the psychological details that come with love and reproduction and the different ways that other animals reproduce, it's something that I really liked about it. And I started reading it back in October, and it's still one of my favorite books, and I don't think I've ever found a book that's even better than this one.
My favorite book is Aragon from the Inheritance series. It's a 4-series book by Christopher Paolini, and it has a lot of fantasy, action, and adventure in it. It's a really good series, and I read it sometime in middle school. Yeah, first time I read it was sometime in middle school. My brother had recommended it to me, and I've loved it since. This book really helped me to kind of branch out, because I had a little circle I always kind of stayed to myself, and this one kind of made me want to explore more. It has a lot of adventure in it, like I said, and it's just a really good book, especially during quarantine. When you kind of want to get out there and go somewhere else, this is a great book to kind of transfer and be in a different world than this one right now.